The Houston Astros have reignited conversations around Nolan Arenado. We'll get into the Houston Astros 2025 season preview tonight. That and much more ahead here at the Upside Sports Network. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Saturday evening. Tonight we'll get into the Houston Astros 2025 season preview. But before we do that, let's get into some of the news and headlines of the day. Yes, like you mentioned there, Steven, welcome in. That Juan Soto did homer in his first at-bat with the New York Mets. Great start for him in his career as a New York Met. But we'll start with the Houston Astros and their pursuit of Nolan Arenado. We remember that the Astros were looking to improve their third base position after it looked like Alex Bregman was going to be leaving in free agency, which ultimately he eventually did. But before they had made the trade to bring in Isaac Paredes, they were in talks to bring in Nolan Arenado. In fact, they had actually come to terms on a trade. Obviously, that never came to pass, but Nolan Arenado, of course, remained on their radar. Obviously, Arenado tried to get takers in New York, Boston, L.A. None of those guys ultimately bit there. Houston obviously went Paredes, and then they brought in Christian Walker as well. Traded away Kyle Tucker, and there was some rumblings that Alex Bregman could ultimately re-sign with Houston. There were rumblings that Jose Altuve, who's been a poor defender at second base, might be flexed out to might be moving out to left field anyway because of his defensive issues at second base. And even in spring training, we've actually seen Altuve shag balls out there in left field, actually taking reps out there in left field like he's preparing to play some there this year. So that leaves one to wonder, have they been thinking all along that they were going to move Altuve off of second base? If that's the case, Bregman's re-signing would have made sense. The trade here for Nolan Arenado would make sense. Obviously, the talks there, though, have fizzled out. They have stalled. Nolan Arenado is no longer willing to, or has never once flexed his opinion about Houston, even after not getting a trade done with Boston or New York or Los Angeles Dodgers. He's still unwilling to move to the Houston Astros. So, as much as Houston might like him on this roster, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Maybe we'll be surprised, but at least right now, it looks like Nolan Arenado will at least stay with the St. Louis Cardinals, at least for the time being. Other bits of news anyway. One kind of worrisome news anyway for the Texas Rangers. Tyler Mahle, a guy that you guys might not recall anyway. If you remember back to when he was best with the Cincinnati Reds, he was kind of a number 2 type starter in that rotation, was traded over the Twins. Ultimately suffered a big injury there, missed almost the entirety of last year with the Rangers. I think he only made like 3 starts last year. Came into spring training this year fully healthy. And his first start, of course, it's spring training. So, guys are always working on pitches. You don't really worry about the results too much. You're mainly worried about your location, velocity, make sure that your mechanics are good, just trying to tune things up. But the first outing for him did not go well this year. Gave up a couple of very hard hit balls, 104 miles an hour off the bat for one of them, and then a 107 mile an hour home run to the former Ranger Sam Huff, who looks like he could get a chance with the San Francisco Giants to make it out of spring training with that roster. Good on him for making most of that opportunity there. Hopefully he can pick the mind of Buster Posey all he can there and try to latch on with that big league team. Good luck to him. But for the Rangers, I wonder what this means going forward. If Mahle continues to struggle, say, again, like I said, it's 2 innings, first start of spring training, way too early to take anything big, consensus out of this. But Mahle didn't pitch much last year, only 3 games. He did have a tendency to give up a few home runs last year as well. He starts things off in spring training, laying a couple of gopher balls out there, right on the middle anyway with the slider. And I wonder if he's just lost that pitch overall. We'll have to see how the rest of the spring goes, but I wonder if Texas has their eye on bringing another innings-eating starter. One positive development for them is Jack Leiter took to the mound today, and he looked very good. If Mahle does falter, maybe Jack Leiter would be the next man up in that instance. Alrighty, appreciate you guys joining us. Welcome in Holly, Hank, Johnny, Steven, Rafe. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening. Hank, 162. I think that might be a little extreme. I think even the worst teams in Major League Baseball still managed to win 40 games. Just look at what the Chicago White Sox were able to manage just last season. No matter what, there's always an upside, Sports Network. Thank you, Hank. I saw your comment on our video. We want to say thank you once again for checking out a few of our videos that we've been posting. If you guys are new here, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on X at Upside Ascend and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Welcome in, Johnny. Yes, we just talked about that one, Steven. Soto going yard. Let's see here. Being a Houston Astros fan, I don't really know if I want Nolan Arenado coming to town. The deal has to be right for us. Well, it's not going to happen, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, Johnny. Now, I think there could be some type of depth signing for them. The best part of this for the at least for the Houston Astros, is they got some really good prospects that are going to be coming up that I have a lot higher expectations for than what I had a couple of weeks ago. I've been studying the Houston Astros minor league system quite extensively the last couple of days just to kind of prepare for tonight's video. And I like the acquisition of Cam Smith, obviously from the Chicago Cubs in that trade for Kyle Tucker. But Bryce Matthews, anyway, had a very nice piece of work at the plate today. And I think he could be a long-term answer for them somewhere if that bat continues to develop. Still a little early. It is still spring training, and I want to see how he handles better competition. But if he's able to do that, the Astros might continue to develop here. So that's been the one bugaboo about this Astros organization. The one thing that got them to this point was being able to draft and develop their own talent, supplement that with free agent additions here and there, maybe a trade here and there. But primarily, they were a homegrown team. We've seen almost all of that top-end talent come out of that minor league system and honestly has started to leave that organization. Look at Alex Bregman among several other players, Carlos Correa, George Springer. It's just a new era for the Houston Astros. So hopefully that next wave of talent is just as good as the previous one. Otherwise, I wouldn't consider this a World Series favorite team. I still would consider them at least a wild card contender at worst this season. So hopefully Houston will do very well this year. Other bits of news that I wanted to get into anyway. The Los Angeles Dodgers look like they're going to be giving second base over to Hyesung Kim. They're signing from the KBO. He signed that 3-year, $12 million deal with a couple of options on the for years 4 and 5 on that deal as well. Really good value for Los Angeles, and to get a starting player out of it, just way to go, Los Angeles, be able to swing that type of a deal. A few other minor league notes. Canna, anyway, has decided to go back to the Milwaukee Brewers on a minor league deal. And then let's check out the Mets for kind of the last update as far as the news, anyway. The Mets had that Frankie Montas injury about a week ago. It was a lat strain. Was expected he would miss 6 to 8 weeks. Montas says he'll miss more like 4 to 6. He thinks he's got relatively good news from the doctors that he should have a faster road to recovery. In either event, it looks like the Mets would prefer to steer away from adding somebody to this rotation because they're expecting Montas to come back. If the injury does linger and he does, have a setback, or this timetable does extend to that 8 weeks time frame, maybe they could go for another starting pitcher. They just had one in Jose Quintana that is still out there on the free agent market. He had a solid year last year for the Mets. Maybe they could revisit that possibility. But for right now, they're at least going to stand pat there in New York. Rafe, Lighter Revenge Tour is here. I'm hoping for it. I think he wants to get in that rotation. I think he's got a good chance to throw quite a few innings this year, and the Rangers are going to need innings out of that starting rotation. Leiter could be one of those guys that's given a lot of opportunity this year, and we'll see if he's able to grasp onto it as well. What is the facial hair policy for New York in war? Let's see here. Whoa, got quite a few comments there. Huff, cool, good for him, exactly. Festa, AAA bound, if lucky. Festa did get into the game for the Rangers in spring training today, gave up a couple of gopher balls as well. I think he's there for depth more than anything else. I don't think he's there to be a good bullpen option for either team, or for either the big league club or the AAA club. I think he's there to soak up innings in a game that's a blowout, and that's what he's going to do. Festa had some good moments last year for the Rangers, but by and large, he hasn't been seen as a true prospect, if you will, in years. Rafe, Molly been injured forever. I'm sure he gets a lot better in a few weeks after he knocks some rust off. I agree there. David, is Clevenger on a team? Yes, he is. He did sign with the Chicago White Sox a couple of days ago on a minor league deal. Spencer Jones went yard. Yes. What about Lorenzen? He is with the Kansas City Royals. I believe he signed a one-year $7 million deal. Got a nice pay bump from last year from the Rangers contract. Let's see here. Rafe, if Langford and Carter have injury-riddled seasons again, I may cry. I don't think you'll have to worry about that with Langford. I think they're going to take the cautious approach. That way they don't bring him back too quickly. In case you guys didn't catch our video that we posted earlier today, Wyatt Langford is out for 5 to 7 days with an oblique strain. I think they're going to be, very cautious with him. I think there's a very good chance he ends up, with Corey Seager as one of the best Rangers on the roster this season. He might even elevate above Corey Seager and enter that MVP discussion if he really ascends to the level we hoped he would when he came up from the minor leagues. As far as Evan Carter, first priority for him is just to get through spring training healthy and to show that he can handle the everyday grind in center field. That way he can take over in center field. The second issue, of course, is that bat. Can he hit left-handers? And today, let's just say he struck out on 3 pitches, and 2 of those swings were, let's just say they made him look a little silly at the plate. And I wonder if this is just knocking the rust off, whatever the case may be. But right now, 0 for 1. We'll see how things go the rest of spring training here, but did not acquit himself very well in that at-bat. Hank, what about Young injuries? I've had enough of that. I would agree there. His injuries have been prolific, as far as the time missed category of it. I think he has got a great option, or I think he's got a great chance here to really solidify and be a leader on this team, especially with the track record this team has right now. And I think his injuries are pretty much all fluke related. I think he's got that injury-prone tag on him that's not necessarily deserved. I think the injuries that he's had are all one-offs, and so I'm hoping for a very solid, productive, and healthy season for Josh Young. He needs it. Let's see. Look out for Dunning this year. I've been saying that for at least 2 years now, and it just doesn't look like the manager, Bochy trusts him or the pitching coach does. And I get it. He doesn't necessarily throw it in the traditional, hey, let me blow it past you at 100 miles an hour. He's more of a pitchability type of a pitcher, but he did show a much better tendency to strikeout hitters at the end of 2023. Really was never given that same opportunity in 2024 to be that type of a pitcher again. They asked him to do things a little bit differently in 24. I hope they get him back to that formula in 23 that works so well for him. Going into that bullpen in a long relief role in the same way he entered 23 in that role, maybe it'll play up his abilities there as well. Let's see. Also, man, how about P.J. Washington? Good Lord, and Moses better than expected. Yeah, P.J. Washington was very good. You remember he was very good with the Charlotte Hornets as far as an offensive creator, an offensive shot maker for them. But his defense was always the side that they always worried about. Mavs trusted it would be fine, and it was. Moses Brown, I thought, would give him size, which is exactly what they needed, and really utilized that size well in the fourth quarter against Zion there. But I'm with you there. Welcome back, Carter. Welcome back, Cotter, like the TV show. I like that one. DeGrom, too, my goodness. Yes, DeGrom is the one player I'm really hoping has a very good spring, primarily just staying healthy. Rocker is probably going to be a guy that they're going to utilize towards the end of spring training and try to gear him up for a May, early June into the rotation for the Rangers this year. All right, Rafe, I can't be too mad at Young. I mean, bro got drilled and unlucky. I don't know if he's injury prone. That's kind of what I mean. He's had fluke injuries, if you will. What do you call a baseball player with no arms? Yikes, that's a rough one there, Hank. All righty, appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get started with our 2025 season preview for the Houston Astros. Welcome to the 2025 season preview for the Houston Astros. My name is Michael here at the Upside Sports Network. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest for Major League Baseball throughout the MLB season. That way you stay up to date on all the latest rumors, headlines, roster construction, what's going on with your lineup, your rotation, your bullpen, what's going on in the minor leagues. All of that will keep you updated on and much, much more here at the Upside. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. Follow us on X at Upside Ascend and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. The Houston Astros had a pretty solid year last year. Overall, they had some pieces ultimately get jettisoned from the roster this offseason, though. Kyle Tucker gets traded to the Chicago Cubs. They bring in Isaac Paredes. In that deal, they finally solved their issues at first base with the addition of Christian Walker. And, of course, the big loss is Alex Bregman leaves to go to the Boston Red Sox. Now, we did have some headlines that they're still looking to make some improvements to this roster, even today, looking at the possibility of bringing in Nolan Arenado. Arenado still has yet to waive his no-trade clause to allow him to be traded to the Houston Astros, and he says he's not willing to budge on it. That's why trade talks have once again got started for the Houston Astros and immediately got stalled because he is unwilling to accept a trade to Houston. He does have that no-trade clause. He has that prerogative to accept and decline trades to those teams, so we'll see if they can find a trade more to his liking. But as far as the Houston Astros, this is a team in kind of a transition phase. They're no longer the team that has the Justin Verlanders, the Garrett Coles, the Carlos Correas of the world, Alex Bregman, Kyle Tucker. Now it's the team led by Pena and Altuve and Paredes and Walker, Framber Valdez in the final year of his deal, and some starting pitchers, Hunter Brown, that they're really going to be counting on this year and next going forward. Very different era of Houston Astros baseball. Let's get into it. All right, now Houston, we'll start with where they were last year as the page goes away. Let me pull that up for you guys. Bear with me for just a moment. There we go. Full season. There we go. Pull up the standings. Had all this loaded right before my video, and then it times out on the webpage. So, All right, so Houston last year wins the AL West, 88 wins to 73 losses. Second place in the division was the Seattle Mariners at 85 wins and 77 losses. So about 3 games clear in the division anyway. As far as the teams though, for Houston, this was a division that really kind of bit itself in the foot or shot itself in the foot. Texas didn't really have any health all year long. Their offense struggled all year long. They were never really a threat the entirety of the season. As far as the Seattle Mariners, they certainly had the best rotation in the division, but of course they had no offense, and thus Houston having a very solid offense, solid enough pitching, and a good bullpen, especially in the second half, they kind of ran away and hid towards the end of the season. Wasn't really that competitive a race, even though it looks a little bit closer by the record itself. Looking at the depth chart for this season, they're going to have, of course, Jose Altuve. Paredes is going to slot in there at the number 2 hole after Bregman leaves in free agency. Yordan Alvarez is still there as the DH. Christian Walker takes over at first. This is the biggest addition to me for their lineup itself. First base has been a black hole over there. They tried solving it with Jose Abreu, Yuli Gurriel, among several others. John Singleton as well. Ultimately, none of those options worked. Singleton may still make the roster this year. Honestly, I think they might go a different direction, though, to get more positional flexibility there. But I think Christian Walker is going to hold down that position pretty much the entirety of the season. I'd be surprised if he misses anything more than, say, 15 to 20 games this year, aside from maybe a bigger injury coming into play here. But Walker really solves a lot of issues for this lineup. But the one other thing I will mention, look at how their lineup is so much more right-handed now. They could use another lefty bat as they go through the year. Then you get Yainer Diaz, a really good offensive-minded catcher there. Pena has some ups and downs. Of course, World Series MVP at one point as well. Chas McCormick, Ben Gamble, and Jake Myers, obviously the weak links of this team. If they're going to add a bat this offseason or during the season, I would say that the outfield is where they're going to look to do it. So don't be surprised if they add some type of a bat to that outfield mix at the trade deadline. If somebody becomes available that they see as a improvement for their outfield group, that would be something I could see them trying to do. Bench, Caratini, Singleton, Rogers, who just signed a non-roster invitee deal, and Mauricio Dubon once again make up this Astros bench. Love the signing of Rogers. I really hope he does make it out of camp with this team because I think the flexibility of him in that infield is going to be invaluable, especially considering how Altuve might be forced into the outfield. Rogers hopefully will get some solid at bats there. He's a player I still have some hope for as far as him actually making it. As far as this rotation goes, Framber Valdez, of course, at the top. Hunter Brown had a very good May through September last year. I would like to see him do it one more season before I call him an ace on this staff. He was that good last year. Projections this year, they have him around a 3.71 ERA. If he has something like that, I think it'd be a good sophomore season, but it wouldn't be ace quality. I think an ace quality pitcher here, if he has a really good second year, we're probably talking to 3.25. Maybe a sub-3 ERA. Framber Valdez, though, of course, their ace of the staff, can be emotional. Has an expiring deal. We'll see if he remains on this roster through the entirety of the season, or if they try to trade him away and maximize the value in return for him, like they did for Kyle Tucker. One thing to kind of keep an eye on there. Then, of course, you have Ronel Blanco, who had a really good start to the season last year, no-hitter and all that kind of thing. Spencer Arrighetti is going to be the number 4 starter, and then Wisniewski is the number 5 starter to start the season. He was one of the pieces that was brought back in the deal for Kyle Tucker as well. I imagine he probably goes to the bullpen in the long relief role when some of their other starters get healthier into May and June, July. But for right now, he's probably going to be penciled in as a starting pitcher to begin the year. Now, the one thing I worry about with what we're looking at here in this rotation, one, of course, is the emotional nature of Framber Valdez. That, and he's only signed to a 1-year deal. How does Brown respond to a very good freshman campaign? Does he have that typical sophomore slump? And then the rest of that rotation, what are they going to do? Does Blanco, reestablish himself like he did in the beginning of the year last year? Or does he continue to have struggles like he did towards the end of last year? Arrighetti had a nice debut season, but I'm not exactly expecting a sub-4 ERA from him this year. But for a number 5 starter, that's not bad, but they're counting on him to eat some innings early in the year, especially with all the injuries they have in that starting staff. And Wisniewski, I would just want to make sure I don't ruin his development more than anything else, that I'm not putting him above his pay grade. I want to give him some time, of course, at the major league level, but I'm just not sure if he's ready for the bright lights yet. We'll see how things work out this year. But starting the season in that rotation, maybe that would be the best case for him to kind of get him used to something that they're hoping he will do in years going forward. If they see him more as a bullpen guy, then I would rather have him in the bullpen to start the year rather than in that rotation. But like I said, they have a necessity for some starting pitchers right now, unless they add another one in free agency, which, again, they're right up against the luxury tax. They're not going to do that at the moment. Bullpen, of course, they traded away Ryan Pressly because they have Josh Hader as their closer. Brian Abreu, I think, is one of the better setup guys in the entire league right now. And then you look at the rest of this bullpen here. Rafael Montero is back with the Astros once again as a non-roster invitee. We'll see if he makes the roster once again. Remember, they're still paying him from the last contract they ultimately cut him from. Then, of course, you have Taylor Scott, King, Ort, and Whitley in that bullpen as well. He could be a mix or be in the mix for one of those starting spots to begin the year as well. Now, remember I mentioned those injuries to those starting pitchers. Taylor Trammell on the position player side, and then J.P. France, Luis Garcia, Christian Javier, and Lance McCullers. That's 4 guys who could really eat some innings for you this year. Ultimately, are going to miss at least a month, if not more, of the season. I think Lance McCullers is the closest to coming back. Might be back in early May, late April, somewhere in there. I think Christian Javier, Luis Garcia are looking June, July for those guys. But we'll see how the season ultimately progresses. I think they're going to have to get some really stellar performances at a lot of young players in this rotation to really keep this team afloat early in the year. And then hopefully those guys, enter the season, and hit the ground running, because they're going to need them to. This offense isn't nearly as good as it used to be. Looking back up at this lineup itself, they only have, one player over a 4 WAR. That's Yordan Alvarez, one of the top probably 3 to 5 hitters in the entire game. Altuve is still a very good player, just signed that 5-year deal. But again, only a 3 WAR season. He's 35, or about to be 35 years old this year. And I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank, how much speed he has left. And we've already seen his defensive metrics fall off at second base. Isaac Paredes, almost a 4 WAR season. I think he'd be a very good piece in this lineup. Christian Walker, I think 3.2 is a little low for him. I think he could very well be a 4 WAR player. And Yainer Diaz, I think, is another player whose offense could really shine this year, especially given more opportunity at the top of this lineup with the departure of Kyle Tucker and others. So something to kind of keep an eye on is how the back half of this lineup really works out, and if they add another bat at the deadline. As far as their prospects go, Houston, last year, of course, this is kind of their top 10 here. Cam Smith, they just brought in that trade for Kyle Tucker, of course. Bryce Matthews, one of the pieces I'm really hoping that latches on with this team. Looking at the numbers that he had last year, played for 4 different teams. Sugarland really didn't get much time there, only 12 games anyway, only hit 143. But looking at his numbers, just look how he's knocking the cover off the ball in his first 2 stints of the year anyway. Then you get to Double-A, and that's when he really starts to hit those struggles. So we'll see how things work out for him. I think he just needs another year of seasoning. I think he's at least a year away at the current moment, but we'll see how things work out there. Luis Baez is another piece that could be a bright future for them as well, but these pieces are a little further away. They need their pieces on the active roster to make a bigger impact than what they've had so far, especially in that outfield mix. All right, let's look at the payroll for the Houston Astros. Of course, they had a couple of pieces already leave in free agency over the last couple of years, and in trade with Kyle Tucker leaving. What does their salary look like right now? Of course, Jose Altuve just signed that 5-year deal. He is signed for the foreseeable future, making $33 this year, $33 next year. And then the back half of that deal really does drop down, which is kind of nice for them, but a $25 million average annual value. Walker, of course, is making $20 million, free agent in 3 years. As far as free agents after the year, Victor Caratini, no big loss there. They can always sign a backup catcher. And Gamble, who they just signed to a deal, will be a free agent at the end of the year. Otherwise, they have long-term money committed to Lance McCullers. Hopefully, they can actually get some production out of him after him being injured the last couple of years as well. And then, of course, Josh Hader. The reason why Ryan Pressly is no longer on this roster, the reason why Alex Bregman, there wasn't enough money for him to go around, is because they brought in Josh Hader. So he better be worth the money if Houston's going to do much of anything in the postseason this year. If he struggles in the postseason, or if he struggles during the regular season, this could be a wild card team at best that could be severely threatened, possibly being bounced before we even get to the postseason if he does struggle at the back end of that bullpen, because they no longer have that safety net of Ryan Pressly once again. Now, of course, they still have one of the better setup men, like I mentioned, in Brian Abreu, but the ninth inning is just a different animal when you have to do it day in and day out. and very few people have been able to hold down that type of a job. It's a very demanding skill set to have, a very demanding mindset that they require, and I think Houston is going to rely quite a bit on Josh Hader, especially when you consider the youth in that rotation. I imagine they're going to try to use him for multi-inning saves at some point this year as well. Now that he's got his money, I'm sure Josh Hader will be more open to doing that than what he was at the end of his tenure with the Milwaukee Brewers and with the San Diego Padres. Looking at the overall payroll here, scroll all the way down to their luxury tax commitments. Right now, with all the payments to players, arbitration, etc., right now they're sitting at about 236. They have a little bit of money here where they could add one more piece, maybe in that range of $3 to $4 million. Remember, first luxury tax threshold is at 241. This is a team that does not and will not go over that threshold for this team. So expect them, if they're going to make some additions here, especially big money additions, they're going to have to offload some salary in order to get that kind of thing to happen. So remember the idea of bringing in Nolan Arenado? That would probably have required some salary going out that would have matched the salaries coming in, or at least some retention there from St. Louis, plus taking back some type of a salary in return as well. I'm sure it would have cost a pretty hefty package of prospects to get that type of a deal done, especially with St. Louis essentially footing the bill for them. But again, they're right up against the luxury tax. The only player they're willing to go above that threshold for was Alex Bregman. Obviously, he is no longer on the market, so that is not happening. The one thing I will mention is look at how their numbers kind of change as you go down the road here. 135 next year, pencil in, say, another $45 to $50 million in players with arbitration. That's going to knock it up to 180. You might be able to sign one impact piece next year or split it up between a couple of guys, especially when you consider Framber Valdez is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. I imagine they've been trying to get an extension done all offseason long with nothing really to report there as far as any significance in the talks there. But maybe we'll be surprised and they get this thing done before opening day. I doubt it. I think he will actually test free agency just like Kyle Tucker is going to be testing free agency. At the All-Star break, once we get closer to the trade deadline, could be a very interesting discussion around Framber Valdez. If the Astros do get out of the gates a little bit slower, do they then revisit the idea of trading Framber Valdez and getting something in return for him before losing him in free agency, essentially for just a compensation pick? Will be an interesting discussion to have around that point. But for right now, I still think they're a very competitive team in the AL West. And I think they're one of the teams that I'm counting on to be right in that wild card mix as well. As far as wins of the offseason, Christian Walker. That's where it begins and ends for me. I think Bregman is a very good third baseman for them. I think Paredes is another very good third baseman for them. Kind of a wash as far as I'm concerned, as far as the difference in players over there. But Christian Walker is the real difference maker here for the Houston Astros this offseason. He really does solve a big glaring hole that the Astros have had for a couple of years now, and he's going to cover that just perfectly. One of the best, if not the very best defender at first base as well, and the offense is coming around a little bit more power in the bat, and I imagine he's really going to enjoy playing in Houston with those Crawford boxes there. So kind of keep that in mind with Houston. They really haven't had a player of his caliber at first base in years, and we'll see how he performs this year. I think they're really going to enjoy him down there in Houston. Now, again, the biggest miss to me of this offseason is not bringing back an Alex Bregman, not exceeding the luxury tax threshold, not adding another bat to that outfield mix, going after Jurickson Profar or Anthony Santander in return. That's a real miss as far as I'm concerned. I thought this team really could use one more significant bat that would really kind of demonstrate an improvement offensively, especially when you're starting the season with 4 injured starting pitchers, guys that you're going to be counting on at different points in the year. Something to kind of keep an eye on there in Houston is what they do to address those remaining issues, holes, mistakes, whatever you want to call them at that point. Speaking of those holes, let's see what we can do as far as a trade here for the Houston Astros. We've done a lot of trades possibly with them selling some pieces. What about for the Houston Astros if they're trying to solve some of their outfield issues? You think about some outfielders that could be available, maybe some cheaper options there. One trade that we did talk about the possibility of that could be a win-win for both sides, Houston and Baltimore. Now, I'm going to say this a big caveat here. This is if Framber Valdez looks like he's going to be leaving in free agency. So you send him to the Baltimore Orioles. Pretty good trade value there. Orioles, they're not willing to take on too much salary this year, but they do have a long-term piece that you'd really like to have as well. With only 1 year left in free agency, until free agency. Hurstead, I think, would be the perfect headlining piece to come back in this trade to help out in that outfield there. Now, of course, you'd rather have the ace. That's so much more valuable than a younger position player, even as good as a player as Heston Kjerstad is. But I think you could add another couple of lower level pieces here. You could put in for it in this deal. Let me see who's in the major leagues on the lower end side of things, on the pitching side. Suarez, no. Cano, no. None of those really make sense. Trevor Rogers, but that doesn't move the needle for the Houston Astros there. Let's go to the minor leagues and give them a minor league pitcher here. Somebody who could be ready for some real elevation of their status. I'll just go ahead and throw forward in this deal here. Validate the trade, post it. So we've done this trade before with them trading out their starting pitcher, Framber Valdez, and bringing in a cost-controlled long-term outfielder here. This is obviously a trade that would work for both sides. I would love it more for Baltimore than I would for Houston, just because I think Framber Valdez gives them exactly what they need, an ace at the top of their rotation. I would prefer them to go with more of a long-term option. As far as that starting staff, like a Sandy Alcantara or Pablo Lopez, somebody signed for multiple years, rather than a guy who's just about to hit free agency. And if you trade for him during the year, of course, you're not going to get a compensation pick back as well. So, I do like the trade, but I think I would prefer to go somewhere a little bit different if I'm Houston, because I would try to keep Framber Valdez in this deal. So, what other places could you go for outfield help if you're Houston? If you're looking for outfield help, just kind of think of a few teams here. The Angels have a couple of guys that could be a fit. A's have one or two, but not really willing to trade him. Blue Jays got the guy I thought they were trying to bring in Anthony Santander. Obviously, they fall short. Braves aren't moving any of their outfielders right now. Brewers, they just brought in Mark Canha. Maybe they could move off of one of their younger outfielders there. Could be a costly trade, though, to get that one done. We just talked about Nolan Arenado for the St. Louis Cardinals. Obviously, that's not going to happen right now. Chicago did add a couple of guys on minor league deals. Maybe they revisit some trade talks there with Chicago. Arizona has some good outfield depth there. They could trade one or two of those pieces. Dodgers, of course, are going to face somewhat of a roster crunch as we get closer to the end of spring training. Maybe you take advantage of that situation. None of these teams are really popping out. Maybe the Padres, but they need outfield help. They're not looking to give away some of it. Rangers, you could, of course, go for Leody Taveras, but that's not going to happen between the division rivals there. Rays, that could be an interesting one. Red Sox, you could go for Yoshida, I suppose. Financially, it wouldn't make sense, though. Royals, they're looking for offense. They're not looking to trade it away. Twins could be the team here, as they're looking to maybe salvage their season. Kind of gear up for a rebuild anyway. Let's kind of go down, all the way down here. Let me do the majors. We're looking in the outfield for the Twins. Buxton really is the only one here, and I'm not sure he's healthy enough really for Houston. And he does make a little bit of coin too, so you'd have to offload a little bit of salary there. Let's move off of the Twins here. White Sox, you got Robert. All right. Scroll back up to the top here. Let's go with the Brewers, because they have some good cost-controlled outfielders that they could use some starting pitching or some of the other talent that Houston might have there. So looking at the outfielders that could go to Houston in this deal, Mitchell makes a little bit of sense, not a whole lot. Frelick possibly as well. Looking at this outfield mix, none of those guys really jump off the page. I was thinking maybe a Mitchell, but his value is just too high for what Houston can afford. Let's go to the Blue Jays here. Varsho could be a gettable piece, especially if they sell at the deadline. Not saying he's a perfect fit, but that could be a legitimate one at 7.8. We'll keep Dalton Varsho in mind for an outfield addition for Houston here. Like I said, Atlanta's not looking to offload any of their outfielders. Let's look at the Diamondbacks outfielders here. Jake McCarthy is one name that I've heard quite a few different times as far as being available the last couple of years. Ketel Marte, they're not going to move him out to the outfield, obviously. Gurriel could be a nice offensive piece, but he's making a little bit of coin now. Maybe you go in free agency for a Verdugo. Let's look at the Dodgers positional jam here. James Outman could be a guy. So James Outman, Dalton Varsho, probably the two names I would like so far if I'm Houston. If I'm looking for more of a proven player, though, maybe a Mike Yastrzemski on a one-year deal could be a nice piece at $9 million. Maybe you get the Giants to eat, say, $6 million of that. I don't think they would do the trade at this moment, though. But, I've seen stranger things happen. That's another name I kind of like there. Guardians, they've never really had a lot of outfielders, and they still don't. Who did I see on the Angels? Ward, Adele, Moniak could be a nice piece. Soler is there as a negative asset. You're not getting Trout, obviously. Nationals, who do they have as far as a veteran here that could go out the door? Ahmed Rosario? No, that ain't happening. The Mets were willing to eat the entirety of Starling Marte's deal if they could get a veteran or a middle relief option. Maybe that could be a piece that if you get the Mets to eat, say, the entirety of that deal, give them some decent piece in return, and that could work. So Marte, Varsho, and Outman are the three names so far that kind of make sense here for Houston. Just kind of going through the list here. If you guys are just joining us, this is the 2025 season preview for the Houston Astros. Just trying to fill some holes here for Houston. We've already discussed the way their lineup looks, their rotation, bullpen, what their bench is going to look like, their prospects. We've already discussed a little bit about their payroll as well. As far as a whole on this team, their outfield really could use a nice uptick as far as an offensive production there. Doesn't look like the Nolan Arenado trade is going to happen once again. And so they're still looking for another bat to this lineup. So that's kind of what we're looking for here to see which teams kind of make sense as far as a trade fit between the two clubs. Let's go ahead and look at the Padres. They're always looking to make some deals here. Like I said, they're looking for outfielders after losing Soto and Profar in the last year or so, and Kim as well. Doesn't look like a fit there. Phillies, Harper's now at first base. Marsh is in the outfield. Kepler is there. I'm sure they would love you to take Castellanos, but that's not going to happen. Pirates, they don't really have any offensive pieces that work. Let's look at the Rangers once again. Adolis Garcia would be interesting, but you're not trading within the division. They don't even have Leody Taveras on the page. Okay. Orioles, let's look at their major league outfielders once again. Laureano, Ryan O'Hearn could be an interesting get. First base DH option. That would be kind of your replacement on the bench for John Singleton. That would be an interesting get for them. But I think he's kind of one of their depth pieces behind Mountcastle, and if an injury happens to O'Neill as well. Nobody outside of that really makes a difference for them. Marlins, I don't think they have too much either. Stowers, nobody else. Derek Hill could be a nice piece, but not somebody you're trading for. Rays, Josh Lowe could be a player. Outside of that, nothing else really makes sense. Literally checking all these teams because nobody's making sense outside of just a couple of players so far for Houston. Because, again, they're just trying to stay underneath that luxury tax threshold. Scroll all the way down here to the Yankees and see if they have a bat or two that might make some sense. Grisham could be an interesting one. Doesn't really help offensively, though. Giancarlo Stanton, obviously not going to happen. Nobody else really makes sense out of that group. I don't think the White Sox have anybody that comes to mind. Andrew Vaughn, maybe. Maybe revisit Corey Julks. That's not going to happen, though. Benintendi, obviously a terrible option. Not going to happen. Maybe a Nolan Jones trade with the Rockies. That would be an interesting one. Let's look at the Tigers here. Veerling, Kerry Carpenter. You're not getting those guys. Those are too valuable there. Let's do the Rockies. Nolan Jones, a 9.4 piece, would immediately go into your outfield mix and probably would be at least a position player or platoon player for you at worst. At best, he solidifies an outfield spot for you. Not a bad get there. Going back the other way, you're looking around a 9 valuation. You could do a couple of these younger starters here. Packaged together like a Ryan Forsucci, and maybe like a Ryan Johnson. Maybe go a little bit more expensive and send a Walker Jarrett and go with another younger piece as well. Luis Baez's prospect status will be elevating here shortly. Do not be fooled by this 3.4 valuation. They don't have a lot in that range, though, that really fits the trade here for the Rockies. Let's take out the Rockies here. Let's look at the Red Sox. I can't remember if I already did or not. Ref starter. Doesn't really do anything. Yoshida making $54 million. They'd have to eat quite a bit of that salary to make that make sense. They did just bring in Alex Bregman. Maybe you take back Yoshida and get them to pay down the first year of that salary. Maybe. Not a terrible option. Not a good one either, though. The A's, I don't think they have anybody, though, that really fits. Seth Brown is the only one I could think of, and he doesn't really fit the need of a better offensive piece in that outfield. Mariners, I know they're looking for help. Maybe you go for Randy Arozarena in a trade there. I doubt it. Haniger, no. I think we've run the gamut of pretty much all the options here. Did I already do the Reds? Yes, I did. I think that's pretty much every team. Let's look at the Cardinals just for kicks and giggles. Nootbaar, you're not getting. Burleson, you're not getting. None of those really make sense. So if you did want to make a trade, Blue Jays could be the fit here. Maybe you get them to pay down a little bit of George Springer's deal. Bring him back to Houston. Say you bring back Varsho as well to give you some more depth in that outfield. And say you're sending what? You'd have to eat, what, $20 million of that for that to make sense for Houston? Maybe 25. You do 20 this year and $5 million next year. And now you get an 8.7 value coming back. Houston could easily afford that. You send a couple of, decent pieces back. You send Luis Baez, probably be the headliner of this deal. And I'm going to undersell it because I think his prospect status is going to jump up to at least in that 6 to 7 range. So we'll do the 21-year-old pitcher here. Now, it still looks like they're underpaying, but this actually is a little bit of an overpay with Baez. But that's what you get when you're paying $25 million for the Astros to have George Springer back. Now, if you take out George Springer, I think this trade still makes sense just straight up for Varsho. But this way, at least you get 2 MLB-level players that would at least help you offensively here. Plus, coming back to Houston, they just did that with Justin Verlander. They seem to like those reunions there. They could use a, kind of a feel-good story coming into the spring as well. 2 years left on both those guys, so, we got a little bit of a runway with both of them as well. Really helps your defense bringing in Varsho, too. Not a bad trade. Do I think this is a trade that I think could happen? Probably not. I just think this, at the moment, I think the market is pretty much dried up as far as the trades that we could see Houston really make. We just went through literally every team out there to see if there was an impact bat that they could make or that they could add in that outfield, and nothing really made sense. Once we get to the trade deadline, other players, other teams will have changed their positioning, will have become available, and at that point, maybe Houston looks for the bat in their outfield at that point. Alrighty. Where will the Houston Astros finish in 2025? I think the instability in that rotation to start the year and the back half of that lineup is really going to hurt them to begin the year as well. And they're going to finish. They're going to get off to a slow start. I'll put it that way. I don't think they'll be 10 games out in front of whoever's in second place in the AL West when it's all said and done. Honestly, I think they'll be trailing, and I think they'll be trailing the Rangers in that division. Again, glass half full guy. I am a Rangers fan. Make sure you guys take that with a grain of salt. But I just think Texas is just a little bit better constructed. I think their offense is better 1 through 9. I think that their rotation, if healthy, is definitely better. But again, health is a big question mark not only for the Rangers rotation, but for Houston as well. Bullpen, I'd probably give a slight nod to the Astros until we see how this bullpen really works for Texas. But I'll say Houston gets one of those wild card spots. How deep in the postseason do they go? I think they get bounced fairly early because I don't think they have the starting pitching really to carry them in a postseason series. I think that lineup is going to be a little bit lacking in the big moments as well. And so I think they get bounced fairly early. Welcome in, Ocean View. Appreciate you joining us once again. Been a minute since I've seen you, but welcome back. Welcome back. Doing our 2025 season preview video for the Houston Astros. Got them making the postseason, but as a wild card team and getting bounced early in the postseason. Alrighty, expectations for this roster. I think the top half of the lineup is going to do fairly well. I think first base is finally going to be solved for Houston. However, the issues are, of course, going to be in the outfield. Do they get enough production in 6, 7, 8, 9 in the lineup? Do they get enough production out of those outfield spots? Do they make a trade at the deadline? What happens with Framber Valdez? Those are all big issues there that are going to have to be solved. First and foremost, around Framber Valdez, do they try to get the extension done? Do they go into the season knowing he's going to test free agency? Or do they trade him and try to reap some of the rewards for what they could get in return for him now, as opposed to waiting for just a compensation pick then? So, as far as an offseason grade, I'll give him a C+. I like what they did with Kyle Tucker. I love what they did with Kyle Tucker because I don't think they've been able to retain him, and I think they got way more value back in return for him than what they gave up. A+ trade. Now the offseason, their inability or unwillingness to go above the luxury tax threshold, especially for an impact player of their own in Alex Bregman, a little bit surprising here. And I think this is also going to reflect negatively on what the previous offseason was with Josh Hader, because the fallout from that cost you Ryan Pressly this year. That money could easily have been used to solve some of the other issues with this lineup, possibly even bring back one of the veterans that the Houston Astros have really built this dynasty with. And I think we're kind of seeing the end of the championship World Series contending level Houston Astros. I think we're now entering the phase where every year they're at least in contention for a wild card, maybe the division crown, but World Series probably a little bit too ambitious for at least the way they're constructed right now. But a lot could change. Maybe Hunter Brown surprises us and becomes the next great ace for the Houston Astros team. Growth and surprises. Looking at this roster here, growth to me, is going to be just having Christian Walker there at first base. Absolutely love it there. Diaz learning more about the how to hit in Major League Baseball, how to defend a little bit better, how to be a better receiver, catcher, how to call a better game, all those kinds of things I think are going to be invaluable for the Houston Astros long term. I think he's probably one of the better pieces on this team going forward. I think he probably is in that top 3 discussion along with Yordan Alvarez, maybe Paredes as far as long-term fits with this organization. So we'll see what happens here. But Houston, I think, could surprise us. As far as win total, last year, I think we just looked at that one. They finished with 88 wins and won the division. I think they're going to lose a few more games this year because of the issues in that starting staff. I'm going to say they finished with like 86, 87 wins. I still think they're above 500 team. I still think they're a good team. I'm just not as I still don't think they're as good as they were last year. And then you look at the Rangers loading up. Mariners kept as good as they were last year. They really haven't done anything yet. I still think they're another team that needs to make a play for an impact bat out there. And in case you guys haven't noticed, you kind of notice a theme in the general with these season preview videos for all these teams, that they're either needing an impact bat and either an impact reliever for them or a high-end starting pitcher. That's kind of the trend. All these teams have 1 or 2 holes that they really haven't addressed yet. I think they're counting on some young guys to really surprise them in spring training, but you run a risk of them ultimately surprising you and failing once they get to the big league level as well. So we'll see what they do. As far as ceiling for this team, I think we're looking, say they win the division, probably go all the way to the ALCS once again. Say they finish with like 95, 97 wins if the starting pitching holds up and the offense surprises us a little bit. Floor for this team is if things go poorly in the first half of the year, they might have to revisit the idea of trading for Amber Valdez, and ultimately they don't make an addition of another bat to this lineup. So worst case scenario, you would drop from, say, an 88-win team to, say, a 79, 78-win team, at worst. Do I think that's overly likely? Probably not. I think the more likely option is that they get closer to the ceiling than they do the floor, but we shall see. Houston Astros had a pretty good year last year, but I think all of us would agree that Houston has finally seen their window as far as a World Series contending team. You walk into the year, say, yep, Houston out of the AL and whoever out of the NL. Those days are pretty much over at this point. It's the reverse now. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers and whoever we think will come out of the American League. Not to say that other teams in the National League couldn't surprise them. Push the envelope with some starting pitching like the Arizona Diamondbacks. If they get Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, and Corbin Burns to pitch 3 shutouts in their series against the Los Angeles Dodgers early in a postseason series or in a round in the postseason, then obviously the Dodgers could be bounced relatively quickly here. So the Houston Astros have been one of the better teams in all of baseball. Hats off to them for everything that they did. Whether you agree with how they did it or not, trash cans or no trash cans, etc. You can't really argue the results of that process. Drafting and developing really worked with this team, and hats off to Jose Altuve for going through those lean years when they were one of the bottom-dwelling teams, tanking teams, going through that entire period of success with his team, the Houston Astros, and then getting the 5-year deal at the back end of his career as well, just to make sure he stays with the Houston Astros for good measure. Good on the Houston Astros for that. So this has been your 2025 season preview for the Houston Astros. Tomorrow, I wrote down kind of a schedule. We'll be doing the Baltimore Orioles tomorrow. So I know we got a few Orioles fans in our chat. Be sure to join us tomorrow. We'll probably do that one either really early in the morning or late at night. I haven't decided yet. Since it's almost midnight right now, I'm leaning more towards late tomorrow night, probably after 10 o'clock. So be sure to join us for the Baltimore Orioles 2025 season preview video. Put out 3 more videos today concerning the NFL, NBA, NHL, and Major League Baseball as well. We try to put out multi-sport information in those short videos. If you guys want to check those out, hit the like on those videos. Share them with your friends, whoever. We would greatly appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who has sent us some super chats over the past couple of weeks. We really do appreciate those as well. Alrighty. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening. We'll see you guys again tomorrow night where we discuss the 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. Y'all have a great evening. Stay safe out there, everybody.